So here we go, one complete playthrough of Cultist Simulator from the very start all the way to the very end as a dancer gaining the Dodo and Draugr achievement. Apologies, this was recorded before the Christopher build, but I think it's pretty much the same here afterwards. On the way, every book is read, every expedition completed, all laws maxed out, and every Mansus visited that's available at the point of recording. The total playtime was just over 20 hours. Of course, it could be done much quicker than that if you weren't exploring every avenue on the way. I'm not going to make you wait for all those 22 hours. Most of this is going to be zipped through at about 5 times speed. It does still mean that there's going to have to be a follow-on video after this. And even then, 4 hours is a bit of an ask. So I've compiled the list below of the interesting moments. And neither am I going to talk for 4 hours straight either. You'll only hear me at the various different interesting moments. And I'll assume that you are passingly familiar with the game when I discuss those moments. So on with the motley, let's start a new game, and let's start with a dancer. As a dancer, your base work is to dance at the Gaiety Club and use either your health and passion. This usually returns a single funds, but sometimes it will return none. You can also sometimes overclock it with adding a further passion or health. This gives you more funds back and the chance of picking up a patron. It's worth noting though that once you get a patron, they will expect you to perform for them regularly. If you miss that, they can never be reinitiated. So we're going to set up before we get our first patron, so no overclocking to start. At the club, however, if you plead, you can plead for your position if you miss it, so time is not so important on that one. As you can see, without a patron, your cash from the Gaiety is fairly tight. You have to keep running it just to pay the time clock. But now, having used the study on the 2 glimmerings, I can alternate the club with painting. Using Mystique with the painting will generate more cash and more Mystique to get more cash and so on, as well as providing a route to get rid of restlessness early on. It'll also start churning out more glimmerings, which I can then use to make the lessons learned of glimmerings to get the imagination skill up higher for more better paintings. Just a quick note there, you can see I put the lesson learnt into the inspiration slot on the painting. Not because I particularly think that's going to do anything, but what I'm doing there is pausing the clock on it, because whilst it's then taken away, the clock does not advance. You might see me do that a lot, using either that or the talk to on summoned minions to pause their clocks. It's something I've seen that actually some people just don't do, but it does allow you to stop clocks so you can keep them going for longer without having to refresh them. Got lucky on the investigator there. That's the weary detective who doesn't really cause that much trouble and doesn't do too much special things. So I'm just going to leave him alone for most of this game, and we'll just have to manage the notoriety and mystique appropriately. So by using the health to dance with, I'm occasionally spawning the heart clocks that reward you with vitality. And then by tagging that in with taking a few long walks and doing the manual labour as a working option, we're building up these vitality lessons learned that's also pumping up that physique skill. Between the tight cash flow, forcing me to use manual labour due to its shorter timer, the 2 dread and the 2 restlessness, I'm actually getting a bit worried here. I need to try and squeeze another painting in to get contentment or similar. In the end, this is going to push me into overclocking the club shortly so I can get a patron and get some more cash. A bit earlier than I would have liked, but I'm just not getting the money. Still not getting many funds, but I've realised I've got plenty of health here to play with, so that's why I just started doing the explore. I may as well find Morland's, Oriflamme and the Adhesive Club at this point whilst I'm doing nothing else with the explore verb. As I mentioned before, the lack of funds I felt was pressurising me into picking up our first patron. As you can see, our new benefactor is Lord Timothy Monday, and he's got his own clock on him. So all that you can do is you can perform for your benefactor, or you can show you off to his friends or whatever, and get a higher rate of pay, potentially. It's a bit variable compared to just the Gaiety Club alone. And every time you do that, he may want your reason to have witty banter with his friends, or he may want you to use your health and a bit of funds to make yourself look good and dance for him. It's all rather variable. So you need a spread across of the health, passion and reason to be able to come up with whatever it is he demands. Otherwise he's going to time out, and if he times out he won't want to speak to you ever again because he's really annoyed and you can't perform for him, and there goes your cash source. And then we have our first performance for a benefactor, just him and his small circle of friends apparently, and then some dinner. So some health is required and some funds. Hopefully he'll pay out well and be grateful. This is also the point where you see I'm now starting to cycle through the Morland shop. When I've got the funds, I'm just going to buy all those books and read them. A few things have happened recently. Lord Timothy Monday was very grateful and chucked us 2 funds. Very generous of him. The imagination skill is now maxed out from all those lessons learned of Glimmerings. But the one I want to talk about actually is you just saw that the inspector finally chewed through all the mystique. It's not great from a painting perspective, we're not going to get a lot of money, but it's the weary detective. He doesn't do anything with that. He's not going to create trouble for us by taking us to trial or turning it into notoriety. This is why I'm quite happy to be stuck with him forevermore in this game. He can chew through all the mystique he likes. It's only when we get the notoriety that we then need to worry about attention. Right, you may have noticed that time when we had a personal performance for our benefactor, he required extra energy, so he had to put a health in the slot, otherwise it would have all gone bust. Then I went in to do a painting, and I didn't put the last passion in the painting, because as you can see, when you finish the painting it spits them all out with them all exhausted. This is one of the things, again, which is why you need this spread across the health, the passion and the reason, because you never know what, beyond the initial startup, your benefactor is going to chuck at you as the extra card you've got to put in, otherwise you could put. So you've always got to leave yourself that one free, just in case your benefactor asks for it. We're now an hour in, and what have we achieved? Well, not much in by way of being a cult. We've maximised our physique and imagination skills, and we're starting to work on the reason, the erudition you're learning. We've got a patron, we've danced for him a couple of times, but it's still a pretty bare board. Very much still in the early stages of building up all your different cards that you've got available. You might even start reading that book at some point. So yeah, cash fund is looking a bit better. We're moving between a cycle between our Patron and then into a painting using Mystique to get a lot of cash out of that, and then trying to keep our job down at the Gaiety Club at the same time. Between the three, we're starting to get a net positive cash flow, which we then send into the bookshop. Unfortunately, I just didn't quite hit the timings correctly that time, and the one that had to be sacrificed was the Gaiety Club. So hence I'm having to plead using passion to get it back, but there'll be no lasting consequences because of that. Right, that was our first book read, and with it our first bit of occult lore from the Lantern. Then you talk about it, and that's going to bring in acquaintances, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get all the acquaintances. I'm not going to try and bring them into a cult just yet, and that's allowing the level of mystique and notoriety to stay controllable, and hopefully very little notoriety, so nothing for the inspector to get too worried about. Once we've got all the acquaintances, then bring them into the cult. So that's the first of the patrons that is actually the patron card type, rather than the benefactor, who I keep mistakenly calling a patron. I'm not overly fond of them. Later on, the spin tree you can get out of them for their commissions is useful for reforging mirrors, but at this point they just clog up the study to try and get those commissions. So early on I tend not to use them that much. Same with the Rite. We've just got our first Rite, and you'll see that I'll use it almost never. It's not one of my favourite ones. Using the moth lore we just picked up, we opened our mind for the medium of sleep, starting to explore the Mansus, starting off with the wood. Mostly these are going to be used throughout all the different Mansus houses to just get me more of the secret laws, to learn about places to go off on expeditions, and occasionally in the early stage to find those cards that keep you safe. That's the first time the weary detectives ever got anywhere with his investigations, thanks to the notoriety it picked up by chasing down two of those peculiar rumours. Now that the tentative evidence is out there, I'm just going to let it wind the clock down on that, which means from here on in, until it's gone, there'll be a complete embargo on taking any action that would pick up notoriety, so that the inspector doesn't ever get a chance to move it to the next stage of damning evidence. Another hour in, and what's just happened? So, the cult is still very in early fledgling state. We've made some acquaintances, but no actual cultists yet. We've read some of the books, which have given us some of the low-level laws, which we've then used to start on the very first stage of the Mansus, looking into the wood. We've also upped our reason, almost to the maximum. But on the downside, our hunters had a run-in with us and managed to get some evidence, which we're now waiting to time out. Still very early days. I'm waiting to amass those cars that we're going to need to really get the cult going and start doing some of the more occult affairs. Just going to pause it there a moment so you can see. Is my benefactor about to propose? Well, the silly old sod's fallen in love with you. It happens to all the benefactors eventually, peril of the job. If you want, you can accept their proposal of marriage, and that is one of the endings for the game. But of course, we're not aiming for that. We're aiming for Dodo and the Draugr. So we're going to have to turn them down. And funnily enough, they don't like that much, and they go away in a huff and don't want to speak to her again. Time to move on and find a new benefactor eventually. It's not going to happen straight away, but yeah, when their love is unrequited, they have enough of you. And we just ran old Morland out of books. So that's the end of that. There's not any use for that shop anymore in the game. We're just going to flog off the junk she just gave us in the auction house, and then we're going to do exactly the same procedure there, where we're just going to buy everything we can out of the auction house to get as many of the various books and so forth that are available. Exit one benefactor, stage left, enter another stage right. In this time, same way, go to the Guardian Club, work there, overclock it with your health, perform really well, pick up a benefactor. The second one is going to be exactly the same. It's going to be a rinse repeat. We'll dance for them or whatever in their private audiences for a while. They'll fall in love with us, and that'll be that. There's only the two benefactors though, so once we've exhausted this benefactor, that's it. No more to come. Now that's Oriflamme's also exhausted of things to buy, so both of them have been completely depleted, and Oriflamme's now just be used to sell. More importantly, despite the competition, we won STUMM. I say importantly because STUMM is going to give us what I consider to be one of the best rites in the game once we've studied it. Three hours in now, still not really doing much on the occult front, but our list of acquaintances has grown really long. We've exhausted both the bookshop and the auction house of books to read and buy from them. We've launched some investigations into the secret history, so we've got some expeditions ready to go. But very much still a strong and steady, stable course. Nothing particularly upsetting us whilst we build up all our reserves of cards. Had a little bit of hesitancy there when I realised I'd started to explore the Mansus of the wood, and that would require passion, but I'd used all my passion and they were all on timers, so there was a very real chance that my benefactor was going to ask for me to perform for them and use passion, and I wouldn't have any. Looked at the time, realised it was probably going to be okay, but what I couldn't do was then speak of esoteric matters on the chance that if it's came up with an acquaintance, that would automatically magnet one of the passions down in there, and I'd be back where I was, and I'd possibly lose my benefactor, hence ending up talking to one of the patrons instead. and that signifies the end of all the available acquaintances and patrons, so there's no point discussing esoteric matters any further. I've played a little bit faster and looser with notoriety to get there, using the intriguing rumours, but my thoughts at this point were that I can let them time out, and by the time I get some of the tentative evidence, the one that's left will have elapsed before it can be turned into damning. So hopefully I won't get into trouble with the law. Now that we've got all our acquaintances, it's time to start actually building the cult. But you have to manage all your notoriety and so forth a little bit more actively from this point onwards. And now we've got our cult to the heart, the temple unceasing with our first believer. So the next step now is I'm just going to use that talk verb to go through all of those acquaintances and turn them into believers. And then we'll have a really big cult. Watching STUMM has just given us the sunset rite, which, as I mentioned earlier, I think is the best rite available. It's the one we're going to use for most of our rituals going on forth in the cult. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that. The main reason is that the sacrifice you have to make to the sunset rite is something that is easy to come by. The influences you use for it are things that's effectively an infinite number of in the game. It doesn't particularly matter. They come and they go, and they're very, very commonplace. So you're not actually really losing much by sacrificing them. And in fact, sometimes it's a benefit. Things like restlessness and dread can be sacrificed to create minions. And then the second reason, which is not quite so important but is useful, is that the non-sacrifice components that you put into that ritual are ones that I personally find are the ones that you can get the higher values of quicker. So you can do some of the more important summonings quicker under the sunset rite compared to the other ones that don't have very onerous sacrifice costs. So yeah, that's why you're going to see me now use sunset rite as the workhorse rite for the rest of the game. A couple of times I'll use other ones, but mostly it's going to be the sunset rite. Now that we've got a cult, and we're going to be starting culty things like rites and possibly doing away with people we don't like, we're going to start racking up notoriety faster than we have previously, and there's a real risk that the detectives are going to catch us out. We actually got lucky a bit earlier there that he managed to pick up mystique rather than the notoriety to turn the tentative evidence into damning. So yeah, time to go through the next door of the Mansus, the white door, because beyond there's going to be favours in authority we can use to offset any potential dangerous run-ins with the law and evidence and trials. So yeah, here we go. Second door of the Mansus, the white door. Went for a quick look around London and got lucky, and there was a hireling available, the entry specialist. I don't normally bother with them too much once you've got your decent cult members going, but I'm about to start doing expeditions, as you can see, and it's always useful to have somebody that you can just throw at a hazard or danger in the first slot. Usually from here, if I can, it's going to be a summoned creature because they're completely and utterly disposable, but if I'm failing that, just lob a hireling at it. This also marks roughly the next turn of the hour. And what have we done in that hour? Well, quite a bit actually. We've progressed. The cult, we've recruited pretty much everybody in it as a believer or a pawn. Just going to do a last one in a moment. We've almost read every single book we managed to get out of Morland's an Oriflamme. We've progressed to the next level of the Mansus, the White Door, and we're really bedded in now in a very stable position to start actually going through the expeditions, doing some rites, really starting to ratchet up through the mid-game process as it is of getting your laws up, getting through the Mansus and so on. So yeah, that was that hour. After turning everyone into believers and pawns, it seems we've got enough heart to jump straight, then turning them immediately into disciples. So that's what we've just done to Neville, and we'll now progress to do with all the cult again, turning them all up another notch. There's our first successful rite, a completed summoning of the Raw Prophet, who's one of the easier ones to summon actually. There's plenty of ways of getting the Grail and Moth with a bit of knock. In this case we used one of our two restlessness, so it's a double duty of getting rid of that potential danger and threat to us. We're about to lob it on the Hebe Stanton expedition we've got running to try and seduce those mortals. And throw another one on the silly old sod pile. Well, what's been going on I hadn't actually noticed, but the Marchioness decided she's fallen in love with us as well, and then got the hump because we didn't marry her. That's our two benefactors done and dusted. We're not going to get another anymore. But if you look at the cash flow state, it's pretty good. We've come down a bit lately because expeditions start to cost money, and we haven't done some painting recently. But now between the Gaiety Club and the painting, we should have more than enough money to see us through to the rest of the game. So thank you very much for the boost, benefactors, but don't need you anymore. And there's the other big advantage of Raw Prophet. With its high value in Moth, it's got a pretty good chance of being able to destroy evidence. And even if it doesn't and it gets lost, you've not really lost anything other than just a summons rather than a cultist, which is a lot harder to get back. that demonstrates why the first 2 slots on an expedition are better filled with summoned minions. Even with the 10 in forge that we had to avoid the shifting paths, we still lost someone. Much better it was the summoned creature than getting an injury or worse on a cultist. This also represents the tick of the hour again. A very quiet hour in some regards. Nothing major. We've done almost all the expeditions on the lower tier, certainly all the unique ones. Starting to work our way through the second tier, and most of our disciples have been recruited, only a few believers left. A couple of laws have been advanced, a couple of books read, but not much really going on beyond amassing higher and higher levels of the various different metrics used by the game. I'm also going to call it on this first video at this point. It's been an hour. Thank you for listening. There's going to be the next video with the next set of steps. So what's that going to be? Well, it's going to be finishing off getting everyone in the cult up to disciples. We're going to do some more expeditions, and then we're going to start reading those huge mountain of books we're going to compile, also so we can get our laws higher up. And then we're going to start doing the dances in the Odysseus Club once we've got the laws to back up the necessary requirements of knowledge for that. So that's for the next few videos. I hope this has been useful so far. I got to see the start, and we're now very much into a stable state on many of the early game ending metrics. I hope to see you in the next one.